Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Joelle Presby. Today, we're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Just so the audience knows, this will probably air in the third or fourth week of May, but today's date is May 4th. So if anything that we talk about ends up already happening, which actually tends to happen, unfortunately, a lot on this show, because I'll predict something and then it'll happen before the episode airs. But today we're going to talk about first with some of the more recent events, and then we'll get into how, if this conflict were to expand, what that might look like. So one of the rumors that I've seen the last 24 hours, and I haven't seen it in like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or
right.
A more respected, which they also routinely produce things that turn out not to be true. But the current rumor, and I think I've seen this in an Australian news source, but like the recent artillery strike on staff officers in Kharkiv,
Mm-hmm.
which there's a rumor that a General Gerasimov was injured, but they can't confirm it, right? I've seen people say that he wasn't injured, but he was there, but he went back.
Yeah.
So, although it does suit Ukrainian propaganda to say that he got hit in the upper third of his right leg, which is basically his buttocks. But it could be true. Who knows, right? And then there's also the ghost of Kyiv. The Ukrainians have finally admitted that was not true. So in terms of rumors, and I'm not trying to pick on the Ukrainians, or the Russians are doing their more than their fair share of propaganda. There was a rumor, but I'm going to say a rumor because there are many reasons that it might not be true, because it just could be a rumor. It could be used to get more views on a particular article, or it could also be an intelligence operation where people, our side or the Ukrainians are trying to make Putin paranoid. So they're reporting, or they're encouraging reporters or leaking false stories that his life might be in jeopardy. So I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying there are many possibilities that could invalidate what this rumor is. But according to the rumors, members of the Soloviki, which is the Russian military and defense intelligentsia, there are rumors that A, Putin has cancer, B, is getting ready to go into treating that cancer, and C, wouldn't that be a wonderful opportunity to orchestrate a coup? So the question is, A, what's the likelihood of this being true? And then B, how would one even orchestrate such a thing when you have different factions in Russia?
Right. I heard the rumor, or I saw the rumor on Drudge Report, and I now don't recall which service was providing it, but the article that I read had that Putin allegedly has cancer, and that he was going to have a surgical procedure for it, and during the time that he was under anesthesia, and a particular friend, close ally of his, who is one of the people leading the FSB, would be in charge while he was under anesthesia, and that the plan was that Putin would be then, within a day or two, back in charge again. So I suppose the most, if this was a story and you wanted to have it happen as fast as possible and move on to other more surprising twists, you just, if it is actually a surgery, you have him not survive the surgery. And then a coup has happened because he's not alive anymore. But if this is a story and you want it to be more interesting, well, he survives the surgery, but he's injured. He's got lingering effects from the anesthesia. His mental capacity is now in doubt. You've planted seeds for people who are his allies and people who are not his allies, both to say, should this man remain in charge? There are a lot of bad ways it could go for Russia, and in some ways that would be actually bad for us if whatever group or cabal was then running things, then perhaps we're not able to withdraw from Ukraine because they would then lose the mandate of their supporters to remain in power.
So if you're Putin, like, you're not dumb. You know this is a huge possibility. And you're going into the surgery. What do you do to minimize the possibility that this happens?
I guess you're vetting your surgeons intensely. Possibly your surgeons' family members are having visits to other places pending your successful emergence from surgery. Possibly you will really pick one key person because I'm assuming that Putin in his own mind considers himself a hero and considers Soviet Russia to be a country that should be won and should be growing. You pick a successor, and if you don't make it out, you let it be known that your successor is in charge.
Yeah, I would imagine they have a natural succession plan in place anyway, much like the U.S. does.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is, but
but there's a difference between having a plan and having it known that the person on the plan has your blessing.
It's almost as if it's better if Putin doesn't provide an overt blessing.
For us, yes.
Even for them, right? Because then
it makes it easier for that person to arrange to become in power faster.
Exactly.
He would need to really trust that person.
Yeah, it's not a country of
not likely
built on trust. Yeah. I would think your insinuation that with the doctors he'd have like a sort of a hostage, like a pre-hostage not crisis, but
and I'm assuming that he's a villain. I'm not buying that if you look at it from his side, he's a hero.
Oh yeah. No, he is a practitioner of realpolitik,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think he's one of the only ones left in the world, which has actually made it very easy for me to analyze what he's going to do, because as messed up as it is, it's grounded in rationality. So, but it's not grounded in morality, right? So if you're able to prosecute your own case in a way that is amoral, what actions would you take? It just becomes a very logical exercise.
Yeah. For the gamers out there, this is strictly min-maxing on a geopolitical level.
Yeah. It's game theory. It's, if I do X and they do Y, if I do A, then they're going to do B, and then you maximize what the outcomes are based on. It's like beautiful mind stuff, right?
Yep.
Nash equilibria and all that fun stuff. So if I'm sitting there as Putin, I think what you said about the doctor, I didn't even think of that, but I think that's certainly one of the things he might do. And at the same respect, I think he would also have instructions out to at least his trusted I'm trying to think of the right word, but
If you don't see me again in X hours, you are to execute the following people.
yeah, the following family members of so and so, right?
Yeah. Speaking of rumors, I've been seeing popping up here and there that um, there are Russians who have mysteriously died of suicide, one after
Hmm.
another, who are in high positions and arguably could be pointed at and say Ukraine didn't work well because of you, because of mistakes you made.
Yeah, there's a lot of bank executives, you know,
Yeah.
particularly people. So one of the folks who was well, suicided in, I think it was either Portugal or Spain. It's probably Spain. It turned out that they were private bankers to oligarchs,
Ah,
which means, again, there's a number of ways that could have come on, but again, like most people, I think it's highly likely that that individual was assassinated. And I think there's several reasons for it, but one could be that person may have been working with Western intelligence in order to help them recover or
and they just got
discern,
turned.
yeah, where the where the money was, right? Or it could have been proactive on the side of the Russian oligarchs to take out somebody before they could be leveraged by a
Mhm.
foreign intelligence agency. So there's a lot of interesting theories that could proceed, but I think the only theory that is not interesting and likely not true is that they committed suicide.
Actually did commit suicide.
Yeah. So again, going back, if you're Putin, you would target, kind of use this subtle threat of, look, I have people out there who are closely watching your family,
Hmm.
and if you choose to take action, I might not survive, but neither will they.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a horrible way of looking at the world, but when you're in that system, you have to think in a very different way and be a lot more ruthless. So, I think these rumors are all fine and good, but there's just so much complexity in order to pull this off. If you're a dissident in that government,
Yeah.
how are you going to talk? Like, how are you going to collude with your fellow co-conspirators? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to talk to them? Right? Everything's monitored. Everybody, and it's a system where people will inform on each other the instant, the instant you talk to the wrong person, you're dead.
Okay. So if he's actually going under the knife, um, there are medicines that are going to be given to him. So to make this work, you have to have a very small group actually involved. You you can go the suicide route where you get somebody who is actually in the operating theater and um, you intentionally kill him, knowing that you and whoever are known to be related to you will suffer for it. Um, you stay, or another version, you stay so much under the radar that you're confident that you're actually a Ukrainian. None of the people being watched by Putin are watching you. Your family is already at risk back in Ukraine, or is out as refugees somewhere else. Um, you do something that messes with the medicine supply. You switch out an important component for saline or something, so that just by regular chemistry he dies. If I had to write it, I would hit up my youngest brother, who just got a degree as a nurse anesthetist, and I bet he could tell me all kinds of things that would be unethical, and that could be interesting stories.
Yeah, there's one particular drug that is they use to prevent organ rejection.
Mm-hmm.
If you amp that up, you can basically take somebody out without a trace. I forget what it's called. And you know,
Right, but that involves the anesthetist or anesthesiologist putting in the wrong amount. If you were just switching out so that they would think that they were putting in the correct amount, but are you actually giving them something else? There's things could be poisoned.
and the question is, how do you get that chain of custody so that you can figure out how to get it in?
You have to figure out what kind of chain of custody is being used. I mean, if you're trying to protect it, the one thing to do would be just to pick at random out of a large lot, so that it would be hard to have messed it up without also having injured a lot of other people first, and that making it be obvious that this lot is
yes, as long as you can avoid any sabotage or replacement between the lot and the hospital.
Or maybe you don't care about collateral damage and you just bomb the hospital where you think he's going to be.
Yeah, but again, Putin's.
But that makes your characters not the heroes anymore.
Yeah, if they're desperate enough, though, they might not care.
Yeah,
and that's where I think Putin made a critical mistake when he dismissed all those 150 FSB officers. Like, you create a lot of enemies who have a reason to come after you. So I don't know. I think he makes it. I think it's a nothing burger, because that's problem number one. And problem number one is hard enough, which is taking him out. Problem number two is who's in charge after he's taken out.
Yeah.
And you could have the hardliners take over, who just make things worse. You could have nobody take over, in which case you have a loose nuke situation with 6,000 warheads.
Yeah, that would be not good. I think everybody outside of Russia agrees that would be not good.
And then you'd also have, potentially some restive populations in Georgia, for instance, in the North Caucasus, where you also have a situation of pending anarchy and strife and civil war. So I don't know.
Which on one hand, from the outside, yeah, let's have a Russian civil war, get them, but no,
that would be very bad. Very bad, because people need money to fund civil wars. And what's the quickest source of money? Well, I can sell nukes.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of danger, kind of. But we'll see. We'll know. We'll know by maybe by the victory. Actually, the victory parade is in 4 days, or is it the 8th or the 9th?
I'm not sure.
It's in 4 or 5 days, let's call it. So, and he really doesn't have much to report. It sounds like the Ukrainians have launched a limited counteroffensive around Kharkiv and have actually started taking back territory. In fact, there's an American that I follow who's fighting with the Ukrainians on Twitter, and I think yesterday he stole a BMP.
Thanks, Russia.
Well,
it's just look what I found. So, they're not doing really well.
No.
And they're not making a lot of progress. So, all right. So leaving kind of the palace intrigue behind us,
All right.
I want to leverage a bit of your expertise, which is in surface warfare, also nuclear surface warfare, but in this case, we're kind of the surface warfare piece. How the heck did the Russians allow the Moskva to be sunk?
Well, we don't really know exactly. It got hit by 2 missiles. The second one probably also the fire spread sufficiently that it detonated something that was in a magazine in the ship itself, and that's what sunk it. And firefighting at sea is really difficult. As soon as you have fires that are class delta that are melting the metal of the hull, the thing you have to do is to get the thing that is hot enough to melt metal out of the ship. So you need to seal off compartments so that you can allow or create a hole in your own ship to get it out. If what it's melting through is going to hit a magazine before it's out of your ship, you're done. You have to abandon ship because you're going to have a secondary explosion. and surface ships, warships are designed to go in harm's way and bring munitions with them. They're not going to be empty of things that go boomy boomy. People who are war gamers who've previously, military war gamers, not playing war gamers, previously had some rules of thumb about how many missiles it takes to destroy a ship, and that this ship should have taken 4 or 5 and it took 2. And on one hand, that's because they got lucky, but on the other hand, it would be hard for them not to get lucky, because surface ships now are more easily sunk than surface ships in World War II, when some of those rules of thumb were applied based on the data from World War II. Does that answer your question? You have follow-up questions?
So when you say applied based on the data, are you saying that they just have ignored the rules of thumb in the design?
Well, when you come up with rules of thumb, you use what information you have. And the Air Force and the Army, as far as having warfare data to look at, you have a lot more recent wars than the Navy does. The navies do. So if you've got a master's degree in operations research, or did an undergrad operations analysis subspecialty code thing like I did, a lot of the information that you have, excuse me, to try to figure out the math of what kills things try to come up with a broad, this is how things work. A lot of your information is old. And so you can take data sets about ships that have been sunk historically and how many shots it took, but it's over 100 years old in some cases. And so we're just learning what we probably thought was so, which was that when ship design has changed significantly, the amount of shots to take it out has also changed significantly.
Now, in your opinion, is this, if you had to ascribe the primary reason this ship sank, again, if I were to artificially constrain it to kind of 3 things, and you were to assign, kind of like rank them out of 100%, right, or ascribe percentages out of 100%, there's one, Ukrainians, like an effective missile targeting of a particular area of the Russian ship. So just call it effective Ukrainian targeting with the 2 Neptune missiles. The second piece would be lack of data and just the fact that the ship design wasn't adequately calibrated for this sort of a strike, i.e. just lack of data, to your point. And then the third is just, what we've seen on the ground, which is absolute and utter incompetence and corruption on the Russian side. How would you, just based on the available information, ascribe those percentages?
Okay, I'm gonna start with the middle one first, the number 3 rule of thumb. I'd put a 0 on that one, because that rule of thumb is about to help you to figure out how many missiles you want to have when you're going against another fleet, so that you at least, assuming everything hits, you at least have enough missiles to take everything out. Mm-hmm. So though that you need less than that is actually not a problem. But so, okay, that they were hit by the missiles in the first place, I'd give that 60%, because if you can not get hit, then you don't need the rest of the stuff. However, there have been ships that have been hit with worse that have survived. So the firefighting, the shipboard firefighting necessity, which is, I think, your number 2 and your number 4, I'd give that another 40%. If you had a crack Master Chief on board, you might have been able to save that ship. I maybe a really good ship's captain, but having been in the Navy, I'd say there's probably not a ship's captain who could have saved that ship. You need a senior enlisted leader to have saved a ship once it's got that much battle damage. Somebody who's going to be running around the deck, who's not busy trying to call back to the admiral and say, hey, we got shot, who's not busy trying to get a message out saying, I think the shot came from over there. Somebody who's focused on saving the ship, and that is it. And determining, okay, we've got our lifeboats over here, we've got these people, we've got those people who are injured, and making the hard calls of, we're going to ignore the people who are burnt from the fire to try to grab the chain from the anchor windlass and wrap it around the ship, so that after we cut a hole through the middle and get these missiles off, the ship is still floating.
Okay, so the Russians were not very good at that.
Well, yeah, but they would have had to be incredible to pull that off.
Well, they also don't have an NCO core.
Not incredible.
They also don't have they don't have a strong NCO core.
Right.
So that goes back to the same problem they have on land, which is why you're seeing all these generals die. Not because the generals are incompetent, but because the generals are actually good, right? Like a good general will, if things aren't working at the front, they will go to the front and make sure things work well. I mean, it's why Rommel was so successful, is he kind of let his staff do the work in the background, and he was at the front. Same thing with Patton, very, very similar. Now, it's not ideally, again, these are World War II generals, right? And modern generals don't get anywhere near the front for the most part, because they have the technology to view and observe what's going on. However, if it wasn't working, I have every confidence that our own generals would do the same thing. They would go to the front and try to affect the situation. But the reason, in particular, the Russian generals have to do that is they don't have a strong NCO corps to help prosecute a military action when their officers get shot in the head.
Right.
So, and they don't practice it. They don't. I mean, I shouldn't say they don't practice. I don't know, right? But by looking at the outcomes of the way that they're fighting, they just don't tend to take a lot of initiative. Like, they won't move. And this is actually, having spoken to people who have been friends of folks who've taken part in these exchange programs. Like a Russian conscript will not move unless you tell him to move. Full stop. They just won't. They won't do anything. Whereas, a sergeant will move in the absence of orders.
Right.
They will
right.
do what is necessary, like a U.S. American sergeant. So there's a lot of interesting things that are coming out of this. All right. So the Moskva, I think that's fairly interesting. What's this thing about dolphins? What's this all about?
Well, again, news that may or may not be accurate. And this appears to be a Russian side propaganda, the claim that they've got some trained pods of dolphins who are out there in the Black Sea and are anti-swimmer dolphins. So if some Ukrainian insurgents are going to swim out to any ship that's moored at anchor somewhere and think that they're going to plant explosive charges, they'll never get there because the sea life itself will defend Mother Russia. And as an American Navy person who I saw this, I thought, what? I have heard the rumors about Russian aquatic animal training, and I thought you had way better propaganda than that, because I didn't think it was true, but I'd heard that the Russians claimed that they trained orca, which are way scarier than dolphins. It's hard to believe that dolphins would actually attack a swimmer. The U.S. Navy at one point trained dolphins to assist in mine identification, which people have issues with because we love dolphins, and if you're swimming near a mine, there's a chance that you'll get hurt, and we don't want dolphins to get hurt. But also, we don't want our SEALs and our explosive ordnance disposal people to get hurt identifying and clearing mines either. So, working hand in hand with dolphins, it's difficult. But the U.S. Navy has never, to my knowledge, trained orca.
Okay, so where did this news come from? Was it from like official Russian sources? In other words, here's my concern. Again, I don't have a very high esteem of journalists, so I think the probability that they just confused dolphins for orcas and vice versa.
Oh, you think that the translation was just wrong?
Yeah. Again, I don't know if that's the case, but I think there's like a 30% chance. Like that's totally something that some idiot journalist would screw up happen. Because they're. Yes, I mean, but are orcas even in the Black Sea?
I thought orcas were pretty much anywhere they wanted to go.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you think it's Russian propaganda. Why do you think that?
Well, I only saw the one news article, and it had Russian script on the side, the English on the other, and it was very, and the wording was very, and they will defend the ships and.
Okay, yeah, very well. Here's another interesting point. If the source is Russian propaganda and a journalist didn't screw it up, right? Which a lot of, the second one's a big if. It sounds like the credibility of it being dolphins is highly in doubt based on your assessment. So which leaves B, the fact, why would the Russians want to put something like that out? And I have a great reason.
You do? Okay.
Given like the Russians were like masterful with propaganda when they were weaponizing it, with Americans against Americans on social media, but they've been absolutely terrible in the current conflict. So here's what I think. Again, if those two things are true, if they really said it's dolphins, and if it is really, the source is really Russian, what they're trying to do is deter Ukrainian frogmen or women from attaching mines to their ships. But the reason that propaganda fails is because it reveals that that's where they feel vulnerable.
Yes. Good point. Good point.
Right? So if I were a Ukrainian, I'd be like, find me some swimmers, like as soon as possible, because these things are vulnerable. And I don't know if there's ways that you can deter if these dolphins are real. I don't know. The other thing too is it was a specific location that they mentioned, which was Sevastopol, right? So they really don't want, they're really worried about Sevastopol being targeted.
If dolphins were real, then you would see people feeding them. Mm-hmm. If they were really trained. I mean, if you want dolphins to stick around somewhere and they're in the open ocean, you better be feeding them.
Yeah, so for some reason, the Russians are really concerned. If for some reason, the Russians are really feeling vulnerable about their port at Sevastopol. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but they're really feeling vulnerable. So again, if I were the Ukrainians, I'd be organizing some sort of a sabotage. I mean, they already clearly have a sabotage unit, right? So you had attacks in Bryansk, I think Rostov.
If it's not a Ukrainian sabotage unit, there's already a civil war underway in Russia because someone is doing sabotage.
There's four options. Number one, it's the Ukrainians. Number two, it's Putin doing what Putin does, right? In order to gin up the population, doing what he did in the second Chechen War, which is he blew up the apartment complex. FSB blew up an apartment complex in Moscow in order to justify leveling Grozny.
Okay. I hadn't thought about that one.
But the thing is, it's so extensive.
And they're strategic targets. I mean, if you do the apartment complex if you want to get public support.
Like if there was one strategic target that didn't really wasn't too, but there's been 4 or 5. It's been So that's kind of the first 2. The third would be what you're talking about is internal dissidents are doing it. I think that's a little bit doubtful. Actually, there's 5 possibilities. The fourth is less likely now, given that there's been so many of these things. But one theory was in one of their propellant. One of them was a propellant factory, and
accidents do happen. Sometimes they're even convenient accidents.
Yes, accidents do happen, particularly when the output of that plant was kind of at a low hum, and now it's suddenly ramp up, go, and the Russians don't really have a great safety culture. They jerry rig everything, right? Yeah. And so that theory I thought was more credible when there were when there's in that propellant factory. Yeah. But I don't think now. I think it's deliberate act sabotage, which leaves number 5, which I don't know if I should even say this, but we have an organization or 2 organizations. One of them is SEAL Team 6, and the other is Delta Force, and this sort of operation is and you could also say British SAS. Mm-hmm. For British SAS and Delta Force in particular, this is right down the middle of the kind of stuff that they do. Yeah. Tier 1 special operating forces where, or CIA, right? CIA is possible where you can, and that kind of bleeds into the internal dissident thesis. But I think it's highly unlikely that we would send the Delta in there, just because if they get captured, it's really bad. Same thing with SAS or SAS, but it's possible, right? I would say that's a remote. And I actually think it would be more likely that you would see them inside Ukraine right now.
Right.
I think that's almost certain. But again, I have no knowledge, and I probably shouldn't even say this publicly. But that's the kind of mission they, because the Ukrainians are exceptionally good at taking out Russian generals, like just knowing where they are. I mean, we are certainly providing them with signals intelligence on these things, which is why they're so successful. But even the execution is a little bit too on the nose. So I don't know. So that's kind of where we are right now in this conflict. If this thing were to expand, what are some of the nasty things that the Russians could do at sea to NATO?
You're talking about cutting the cable? For people who are not already familiar, there are transatlantic cables, trans-Pacific cables that are used to carry information that you would rather not broadcast, and so that you want to have possibly a better secure than if you're doing it in the open airwaves. And people who know more than I do about coding can argue back and forth on whether you can actually encrypt things just fine on airwaves and you don't actually need cables, or whether no, really this is a level of security that anything that is being broadcast cannot possibly have. But regardless of what that situation is now, there do exist cables, and they could be cut. You know, if you had trained Orca, you could use the trained Orca to go cut a cable. That makes me wonder if I should suggest that to David Weber, if the multiverse series ever extends to.
Well, can the Orca dive that deep? I mean, is the pressure? I don't know. Again, I am a complete neophyte when it comes to naval operations, but is it too deep? Is the pressure too intense for them to? Again, it's the Atlantic, so it's not as deep as the Pacific, but I don't know.
Okay. I will have to double check my Orca details again. I've written a lot about Orca, and so from what I remember, but I would check if I were writing this in a novel that was going to be published. Orca can actually get as deep as any submarine or other device that you might be using with a double hull to get that far. And also the cables, yeah, they're deep in the middle of the ocean, but they do eventually come up. So depending on what point you're gonna attack things.
And how well would...
I mean, sometimes sharks chew on them, and they've got to be pulled up and have, segments replaced. And it's obviously this is just some animal which is a shark, decided to chew on it, and look, they left some teeth. And
oh wow!
And it's not severed, but there's been some damage.
Why would a shark chew on them?
I don't know, and this is just the theory is that maybe it feels interesting, and maybe if you can get it gnawed on enough, you get a little bit of a shock.
Or maybe the Russians just poured barrels of blood on it.
Maybe the Russians have trained sharks, and it's classified, and that's why we've never heard about it.
Wow. And then how would one detect these things? I mean, is it possible for are the Russian subs quiet enough that they can pass undetected, or is it a set of probabilities? In other words, if they do all the right things, they can pass undetected, but unlikely. I mean, again, I don't want to go too much into stuff that you can't talk about, but
well, every submarine makes some noise when you have machinery active. The ocean has some noise itself in the background. You can invent devices that help baffle the noise that you make. You can have vessels that run on battery, which are extremely quiet. You can you can put people in a pod that you just lower down, and or that you drop, and that wouldn't, in theory, make any noise, but then what does it actually do anything useful? So those kind of a pod sort of thing that could go down silently would be more like uh, a commercial vessel going down to watch, cetaceans and sharks, and gather information about them, but would be, less detectable. And if you were writing a story, so in fiction world, and you need to fight your aliens, you might end up using commercial vehicles to go after the aliens who have landed in the deep.
Okay. So another thing that the Russians can do, and they can certainly do this on land, but I'd be interested in your perspective. What they can do at sea is sabotage. So, as an example, back in 2014, there was an FSB operation in the Czech Republic where they destroyed some arms caches that were going to the Ukrainians. Actually, killed 2 civilians as a byproduct of that attack. So, it doesn't appear that the Russians, they've actually been remarkably careful. President Putin's comments to the contrary, like he's been completely reckless with his comments. In terms of actions against NATO, they've actually been relatively restrained. Like we haven't seen a massive cyber attack in the U.S. as an example, at least not that I know of.
Yeah, me neither.
Although friends that I know who work on that problem are disturbingly difficult to get a hold of nowadays. But in fact, I invited one on this show. He's just like, I can't talk about this right now. Yeah. But he just said, he's just like, I'm not talking about that stuff. But they've been remarkably restrained. Right now against non-NATO forces, they've been completely unhinged. Right. So on May 1st on March 1st or 2nd, the Russians flew, I think, 4 aircraft over Gotland, which is a Swedish island in the Baltic Sea. And it was 2 Sukhoi 27 aircraft that were kind of escorting 2 Sukhoi 24, I guess they're bombers, but those 2 bombers, 1 or 2 bombers were carrying a nuclear weapon. And they crossed into Swedish airspace for about a minute.
Sure?
Yeah, it's in the Daily Mail article dated.
So we're pretty sure. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen
that, and I hadn't seen it, and I didn't realize is that
detailed.
That a news source.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing where it gets again another reason why I'm not a big fan of the media. What I think happened without any evidence is that the Daily Mail published it, and Western intelligence agencies, called all the major newspapers and highly encouraged them not to repeat that story or echo that story because they didn't want people to be alarmed. Because I was pretty alarmed when I read that story. And in fact, like after I read that story, I'm like, we need to send troops to Ukraine to stop this madman as soon as possible.
If what you suggest happened with the news media actually happened, then they were effective, because I saw an initial bit about it, and then I watched, and when I didn't see anything more, I thought, oh, it must never have happened.
Yeah, I mean, the details were, I mean, anybody can make up like a lot of details, but it was a little too detailed to be.
Yeah.
And it was just like they were in the airspace. They're kind of in and out. They're in there. They were over it for a minute and then out. So it was clearly a provocation.
Right.
And I mentioned the island, right? It's in the Baltic Sea. It's not exactly over Sweden. Now, again, a traditional journalist would be like, Russians fly bombers over Sweden, and while it's true, right? Gotland is farther east, and it's much closer to Russia. It's in the Baltic Sea, and at the time, the Swedes had sent troops there for the first time in 10 years or a decade, something like that, 10 to 15 years, to occupy that island just in case. And Putin sent him a little message. But we would never do something that crazy. But yeah, like I encourage you, and same with the audience. It's the Daily Mail is reported March 1st. March 1st or 2nd.
Mhm.
Actually, no. The report came out after that, but the incident was on March 1st or 2nd.
Mhm.
So again, without evidence, I think the media suppressed, or Western media was encouraged by intelligence agencies to suppress the information. Again, I have no one's given me any background. It just feels like something that is that newsworthy
Yeah.
would have been repeated through various sources. So I didn't mean to ruin your day. You seem shocked. So the point is that for non-NATO countries, Putin's been a little bit reckless in his actions. He hasn't been reckless in his actions, in his statements for sure, but he hasn't been reckless in his actions yet. So, we'll see if that changes, because he's certainly been hinting that, actually less than hinting, it's just, the economic sanctions are an act of war. He's like saying crazy things like that. The way that I figure out what's going on is there's actually a guy on Twitter, or an account on Twitter called Jomini of the West,
Uh-huh.
and they put together, I don't know if it's daily, but periodically, a map of where all the Russian units are and Ukrainian units are. Now, it's not 100% accurate, but that's probably 40% of how I figure out what's going on, because I can look at the map and it becomes obvious where the next Russian thrusts will be, based on just geography and unit positioning, right?
Right.
So they're trying to encircle the Severodonetsk salient, and they're not really succeeding. In fact, Kharkiv. So it's like, I think Izium is kind of that centralized location that they seize that's critical for their main supply route into Ukraine, and that's where that artillery strike happened, where they killed at least one general and may have hit Gerasimov, or not. Right, he survived, but he was either injured or not. Who knows? So, and then of course you have Mariupol, and based on where they're sending their missiles, they're generally attacking two places. Right, the first is resupply routes for in the west, like Lviv and things like that, to stop more weapons from coming in, and then the second place is Odessa.
Right.
So I think that's where they're. Well, and then we'll see what happens with Transnistria, because they still have about 1,500 troops that are sitting right there, and they might be activated if Russian forces get closer to Odessa. So we'll see. It'll be pretty interesting. Now, if I were NATO, there might be some sabotage near those bases. I just supplying weapons, I don't think is enough. I think we need to be a little bit more active. So
I think we all want Ukraine to stay a country, and we also don't want nukes to start being launched. But our wishes are not enough. We probably need to do more than just pouring treasure and send in some blood.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the way you do it is you limit your objectives to Ukraine. Like Russia, we don't have a beef outside of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But the other thing too, though, is if we, I mean, he's already extended it into Ukraine, so I don't know why we're so afraid of, um, you know, sending a little bit more robust, um,
I,
you know,
I think part of that is that we've had a party flip. It used to be that the Republicans were, support the troops and pretty much no matter what, and that the Democrats were anti-war pretty much no matter what. And now the Democrats are pro-war, and the Republicans are, I don't know, maybe and
I think it's split.
and the
I
actual
think it's split.
individuals who had affiliated each way are kind of like, what?
I think it's actually. I think on the right, it's split. So the issue with the right, so the Democrats, there's been so much anti-Russian propaganda related to the 2016 election, right? That, again, much of which, a lot of it was just complete fabrication. That that party's been primed to be kind of this, an anti-Russian caucus. On the right, it's there's still kind of the more traditional conservative Republicans who are kind of the John McCain types of the world, which is, it's kind of the difference between George W. I mean, this is not going to be a clean analogy, but just bear with me. There's the whole quote, like when George W. Bush, when I looked into his eyes, I saw a good human, and then John McCain was like, when I looked into his eyes, I saw KGB, right? So now you kind of have a division there, but it's a division for a different reason. So you have the traditional Republican approach, which is anti-Russia, kind of pro-war and supportive, and that's kind of the what's his name, like the Lindsey Grahams of the world, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have a swath of the Republican Party or conservatives that have lost all faith and trust in the news media. So the instinct,
that swath includes people actually of both political affiliations.
Oh, really? You think
yes.
People on the left don't? I mean, Fox News for sure they don't trust, but like myself, I don't trust any of them. Right? I think they're all propaganda organs in one way or another. But the thing is, just because they lie about the important issues doesn't mean they lie all the time.
Which is unfortunate, because it would actually mean something if you could count on them always lying.
Yeah. So, but the problem is there's a large percentage of the Republican Party believes they lie all the time, so they reflexively believe the opposite, right? Or not the opposite, but they distrust everything, and then they also have this, and the left has this problem in spades, which is, if Donald Trump is making sense, but it's Donald Trump, it's wrong. Right? It's the same thing. Like, look, this might make sense, but like, I can't be on the same side as Soros. Therefore, they're wrong. Right? So you have a bit of this reflexive distrust of the media establishment. And I mean, look, it's been well earned, to be frank. But I think you have to look at the evidence, and you have to look at what's actually going on. And if you take the time to do that, it's pretty clear that the Russians are behaving badly here. And are the Ukrainians as amazing in battle and as truthful as the mainstream media is treating them? For instance, have you ever seen a battle damage assessment in the news media about Ukrainian forces? Like where their forces are arrayed, what damage they've taken? Hardly ever.
I don't think anybody of American politicians is claiming that that Russians are the good guys. There are some who are saying the United States should not be involved. I think that's the most pro-Russia version that I've seen.
Have you been to Twitter?
Twitter is not real life.
Yeah, there are, I should say politicians, but there are commentators who literally have Russian flags in their Twitter profiles. And they're like, I can think of one in particular who's a radio station host. Now he's employed by a Russian media organization.
Yeah.
But there are people who are on there who are with them. That said, they're also employees from the internet.
Those people are Russian trolls.
Many of them. In fact, I exposed one of them once. It was pretty funny. Because I already told this story on the episode where I interviewed Larry Correia and Steve Diamond. But just in a nutshell, I just was randomly going back and forth with one, and then just as an aside, just saying, what's it like working for Yevgeny Prigozhin? Blocked. I think it was one of those times when there's certain ways you can say something that convey that you have more knowledge than you really do. And the response was fascinating. So anyway, all right. So, this could go on forever. So let me try to wrap it up. Where do you think this thing goes over the next several months? The whole conflict.
Gosh, I am bad at predictions. Back several years ago, professionally, I had to make a prediction about what the next war was going to be, and I thought it was going to be China. And I did not see this coming. I now know, having read things that others have said, that there are people who predicted this, that Russia was going to invade Ukraine and that they would do it in this time frame. None of them predicted that the Ukrainians would be able to fight back. So I guess even though my crystal ball was wrong, there are other people who are wrong too.
Well, I mean, but how early did they predict it though? Like a month before or longer than that? Because a month before that's easy. What's that?
A few years prior.
All right, those people are good.
or they're lucky. I don't know. I mean, with the stock market, there are always models that have predicted 83 of the last 2 recessions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm calling it here. The next big conflict is going to be in Africa, and what's going to precipitate it is
starvation.
Yes, and that's coming in the fall. Like the seeds for that will be is kind of the inverse. Will be planted in the fall, because what you'll see is there'll be some stronger African nation that will either send soldiers in to confiscate grain, and there will be issues. Now, which countries? I don't know, because I haven't done the work. But if I were to do the work, I would just look at grain shipments, like the Ukraine's biggest trading partners in that particular area of the world, and those that are most leveraged to them that are run by dictators, right? Because the U.S. might be able to do some damage mitigation by shipping in grain and things like that to shore up our allies in the region. I think you're going to have to worry about these. Now, China might do the same thing for the dictators,
right?
But that's where I think you'll see it won't likely be like a big power sort of dynamic. It'll be more of a kind of a Janjaweed kind of militia sort of thing you saw in Sudan.
Right. And I believe East Africa is on their 4th year of drought. So the ability to produce their own food is, I mean, if that drought would break soon, that would certainly help the prospects for the continent.
And which countries in particular? You think like Kenya? Probably not Kenya because they're aligned with the Brits. Will probably help shore that up. Same thing with Egypt. But we're talking like Djibouti, maybe Sudan, Ethiopia, maybe.
Ethiopia and Eritrea.
That's probably where that's probably where it's going to be. Anyway, but again, I just came up with this and based on what you told me and, the interaction probably in 5 minutes. So take a stab at it.
Well, I pray to be wrong about that because that'd be a lot of people hurting.
Yeah. But again, you take an amoral view and you just look at realpolitik and you just look at where the resources are flowing. That's kind of where it may lead. So on that sobering note, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And, I think everybody should buy your next book, which it'll be in the links below, where you can click on it and find it. And it comes out in November, right? Yes.
November, from Bain Books. You can get the trade paperback. You can pre-order that now. And the ebook is not yet available for pre-order. If you do the web subscriptions with Bain Books, I believe the first half is available for you to start reading now. And then about 3 months before, you'll get the third quarter. And then I think November 1st is when you get the last part of it.
Yeah, just pre-order now so you don't forget. It just, and if you pre-order it, you're guaranteed to get it. You'll get a hard copy. You don't want this like digital stuff. And then it helps you with the ranking and how the book does with BookScan, because BookScan they don't track ebooks. So anyway, support authors, buy the physical version, pre-order so you don't forget, and you can pre-order in the links. All right. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully we might have if you're available, we can also probably have you back in November so that you can we can push. And you can plug your book.
I can tell people what the word dabere actually means.
That's right. All right. Thank you.
Right. Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.